Assalamu alaikum. Mahaba. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, dignitaries, colleagues, and friends. Just before we get underway, and I call and introduce you to our three panelists this morning, this room temperature is slightly higher than the room temperature next door. Next door is Europe, and here it's a little warmer. So apologies if we are getting warm. We hope that will be resolved. Welcome to the first Regional Insight session for Middle East North Africa at the Global Schools and Education Forum. My name is Andrew Short. I'm the Middle East North Africa Regional Director for GEMS Education Solutions, and we cover a wide range of skills and expertise within a team based in Dubai, as well as country director heads based in Cairo, Qatar, the UAE obviously, and Saudi Arabia. I have apologies from several of my colleagues who've had to return back to their respective regions, but I would like to introduce you to Saida Harakani, who's our North Africa Director, and welcome her. If you'd like to have conversations with either of us after this, we're more than happy to meet with you. Today is about regional insights into respective countries, and we have three panelists who I'll introduce you to in a moment. But I'd like to start with just a quote. The Arab world's track record on education, particularly girls' education, is discouraging. 65 million adult Arabs are illiterate, and 2/3 of them are women. More than 10 million Arab children between the ages of 6 and 15 are still not enrolled in any schooling, and on current trends, this number will increase 40% over the next decade. This is a monumental waste of human capacity. His Highness, Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum. Currently, youth unemployment in our region indicates out of the population between the ages of 15 and 24, Bahrain, 20%, Kuwait, 24%, Oman, 19.6%, Qatar, 17%, Saudi Arabia, 26%, UAE, 7%. This morning's session will look at some regional insights into what people can share on tables with a Q&A session of our panelists and within our group, and how we can rectify this problem. Because when we come back in 12 months' time, we have our second regional insight session, we don't want to be looking at increased statistics. I'd like to introduce my panelists, and as I mentioned their names, if they'd make their way forward to these wonderful orange chairs we have at the front. Our first panelist has come to us from Qatar. Some of you may have met Dr. Tidu Maini yesterday, who spoke in the equity gender session. If he'd like to make his way forward. Doctor, welcome. It's a pleasure having you here. Doctor is the special envoy for Her Highness Sheikha Moza from Qatar, the chairperson of the Qatar Foundation. He has 30 years of experience in the management of technology companies in the defence, electronic, energy and the ICT sectors. His extensive experience also includes management of businesses in Europe, US, Asia and the Middle East. Warm welcome to you, sir. Mr. Riadh Al Hassani is the President of Target Training. He is currently based in Kuwait, but has come to us from Iraq. With many years of experience in skills and vocational training, Riadh has worked as the General Manager for HumanSoft for 9 years, previously known as New Horizons in Kuwait. Iraqi by birth, Riadh has an in-depth knowledge of the skills training market and in particular extensive experience of training needs in the region. A warm welcome to you, sir. And our last guest this morning is Mr. Karim Mustafa, if he'd make his way forward. Karim graduated with a degree in business and a minor degree in theatre, so there may be some theatrics this morning. He's worked in marketing for FMCG business for 5 years, and in 2003 decided to enter the education market. He has established a start-up company and formed a school, the British Columbia Canadian International School. Through the past years, he has managed to create a quality benchmark and cooperation amongst competing private schools, forming an international school group in Cairo. So if you show your appreciation of our three panelists, please. The way the session is going to work this morning is each of our guests will speak for 3 or 4 minutes, giving us a broad update on their experience in their respective region with their particular skill set. So I'll hand over to Karim, who will talk a little bit about what's going on with a special adopt a school program that he's also done, and tell you a little bit about the market in Egypt. Then Dr. Tidu will talk to us a little bit about the work of the Qatar Foundation that's been working through Educate a Child, and more importantly, some specific insights into what's occurring in the country of Qatar as they build huge momentum towards 2022. Riadh will also then comment on both Kuwait and Iraq in terms of vocational training, and then we'll open up the floor for some questions. At that point, depending on how many questions we come, as a school teacher by trade, we then may have a little activity while you're sitting on your tables. So Karim, welcome again.
Thank you, Andrew. I thought I'm going to be last, but you put me on the spot. But I'm ready for it. Okay, so Andrew gave you a little bit of an intro of how we got into this business. But I would like to tackle today's talk with the post-revolution change or challenges in Egypt. You know, we've had a revolution about 2 years ago. I'm not a big fan, but there is nothing I can do about it. So there are challenges that have met us, and we're trying to see how can we proceed with our business with these challenges. The idea of schools, of international schools cooperation came to me about 5 years ago when swine flu hit the schools in Egypt. It hit the schools in Egypt at the time of one of the installments, of the tuition fees installments. So the parents automatically thought, okay, you know, let's see if the schools are going to continue. Maybe we should not pay now. And to us as school operators, this is an impossibility. We have commitments, monthly commitments that we need to take care of. So we got together as schools and thought of creative ideas on how to give the program with kids and teachers at home, because education stopped in Egypt for about 2 to 3 weeks. So we got together on very friendly basis, you know, school owners, trying to, you know, to work the business together. But then it evolved. You started seeing competitors, you know, saying 2 schools on the same street forming an alliance. They're trying to put ethics to the business, which is not very ethical. This business is just like any other business. So we're trying to put ethics and make sure that we compete ethically and we help out each other. And this really has showed, or we have harvested the crops after the revolution. After the revolution, the government has changed. New challenges, we have been facing new challenges. And some of us cannot face these challenges alone. So forming a solidarity group was something that is very important for us to formulate and to organize. And we run frequent meetings and we take problems to a bigger level. When we talk as a group, we're much more powerful than if one school talks. I see the education scene in Egypt as something very promising. It's the biggest market in Africa and the Middle East, with 17 million students. A country of 85 million citizens, 17 million of them, 25% go to school every morning. That's a K-12 number, huge number. So we're very excited to continue working in Egypt and expanding. With this new solidarity, I think we are setting the benchmark of professional cooperation between companies in the same field. Thank you.
Thank you. Is this on? I think I'd like to begin with a health warning. I'm not an expert in education. The nearest I can get to education is my own children, who are now grown up. And I have 6 grandchildren, and the range of issues they face and their parents face are bewildering. For someone like me who I grew up in Africa, and yesterday the Vice President of Sudan suddenly reminded me, I hadn't thought about it for a long time. I went to a school with no windows. It was an outdoor school with a grass roof. And I somehow managed to get to Imperial College, where I did my degree. First degree, I managed to do a PhD. Ended up as a professor in the University of California in Berkeley. But that's long ago. The issues that face education today are highly complex. And we never had the luxury of even thinking about education when I was young. So maybe that's a point to begin with, and to see how lucky we are in many ways with the situation we have. And all we have to do is to show commitment and change and involvement, rather than, as I said yesterday, too much analysis and consulting. So really, let me put the context of Qatar first. Qatar is a very small country, tiny country, 1.9 million people, and the locals are hardly 500,000. The Qatari's population is 500,000. It has the second highest gas deposits, or third highest gas deposits in the world. It's the second biggest exporter of LNG, or of gas, after Russia. It has a GDP of $200 billion a year and huge reserves. It's a very conservative country in terms of fiscal policy and economic policy. So we tend not to spend what we don't have. The emphasis is very much on education, healthcare, and social development. And the whole vision of the country has been articulated in a document called Vision 2030, which lays out a roadmap for how we're going to move into an economy which is a knowledge-based economy. And that's a very commonly used word. It's rather abused, I'm afraid, and I'll try and explain to you what we actually mean by it. The whole idea is that Qatar has 50 to 100 years of gas and oil, and that's the time horizon we have to make sure that the population becomes extremely well-educated and well-established, and we have alternative sources of income that will generate wealth for the public of the country. So that's the context at the country level. In 1995, when Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani took over, he felt that the major emphasis he would like to put on his stamp on his rule was education, healthcare, and social development. So he created the Qatar Foundation and appointed Sheikha Moza bin Nasser as the chairperson. Now, she's not just a glamorous lady who's married to the Emir. She's very hands-on, very action-oriented, and a terrible person to work for, because she makes you work like a slave. And I've had that experience for 6 years. And I can tell you the results we've achieved in 6 years have been quite spectacular. And I had a short period after my business career in the academic world. I was the pro-rector of Imperial College in London, which is like the provost, for 5 years. And the speed at which we operated in Qatar was mind-boggling. If you can see the results today, we have a school system which is outstanding in Qatar, the Qatar Academy, which belongs to Qatar Foundation. We have a university system which has about 6 of the top universities. Each of the universities in the subject area they choose is best in class in the world. It's in the top 10. So for medicine, we have Cornell. For engineering, we have Texas, Carnegie Mellon for IT. So these are world-class institutions. And the big difference is these are not names on a building or on an office block you rent, where people come in and out to teach. These are really well-established universities. Each building is iconic in its design and construction. It's supposed to last like the Taj Mahal for many years. And the staff is from the home campus. And the deal with these universities was they didn't have to worry for the financing. The entire money would be paid by the foundation. And the staff is, as a minimum, three conditions were imposed on our partners. The one was 50% of the staff had to come from the home campus. 50% of the students had to be Qatari in the class. And they had to get in through a proper qualification mechanism. The entrance conditions and the exams are identical to the home campus. So if you get a degree in Carnegie Mellon in Doha, you can the next day go and work in Chicago or New York or London because you have an identical certificate, which makes it very tough to get in. And you might think this is a luxury, and you know, when I first came at the engineering school, there were only 50 students. And to have a whole university with a beautiful building for 50 students and 100 staff is quite mind-boggling for somebody who had come from a university system in England, which was struggling to meet its ends meet. So this just shows the commitment to education. So today we have these campuses that are running. The other thing we did, which I think significantly improved the standards, was to create a science program. We created the equivalent of the National Science Foundation, and there is an organization called the Qatar National Research Fund, which disperses close to $100 million a year for research. And the idea here is to attract the best staff in the university. So you get the very best people from the US and Europe to come and teach, who come with their whole research teams. And as you know, research money is very short in Europe and the US. So they are very attracted to come to work in Doha. So we have some outstanding researchers and outstanding research programs. We also created a research accelerator, which I built from scratch. We have now 26 companies doing research at the Science Park. And this is not a real estate project. These are serious programs where we drew up the architecture of what had to be done. We created the strategy for the research programs. And we basically took on the people who are major players in the country, like Shell, ExxonMobil, Chevron, Total, and told them if they wish to continue to work in the country and work with us as our partners, they had to contribute and do their research in the country. So we have some fantastic research going on. And the last count was something like 4 billion rials, which is almost $1 billion of money has flown into the country. So Qatar, you hear in the press, Qatar spends a lot of money buying Harrods and doing rather flashy things. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. We have managed to bring $1 billion of research money into the country from foreign companies. And that is pretty unusual for a country which has a very small technology base. That can happen in Singapore, it can happen in Taiwan, but to see it happen in a country like Doha is quite unusual. And the reasons are very simple. We choose subjects which are relevant to the country, we choose sustainable ideas, and we choose areas of research where the impact can be immediate, and the use of the technology is local to begin with, and then you begin to export. We have developed technologies today which are being exported, which is quite unusual for a tiny country. So that's the context of our education system. Because the foundation has taken off and done very well, it has a leverage effect on the rest of the country. Qatar University has suddenly improved. They have a new president, or they have had a new president for 5 years, and the standards have dramatically increased. So I'm not sure where the statistics came from about 17% unemployment in Qatar. I don't think there's any unemployment in Qatar.
Deloitte.
If there is a number, it's largely because people are in transition between university, school, and jobs, and they can't make up their mind. But we'll come to that later. I really don't think there's an unemployment issue. Now, there is an unemployment issue in the region, and we are doing our best through our social development programs like Silatech, where Her Highness has committed large amounts of funds to see if we can help the young people in the region to get jobs and train them to get jobs. And Silatech has been very active in promoting its activities. The other thread of our social development, and there are many, many things we're doing. We work with disadvantaged children, we work with children who are disabled, and the whole idea of accepting children who are disabled as part of your family is something new in the region. And we've spent a lot of time and effort into creating a comfort zone where people can work closely with children who are disabled and accept them as part of the family and look after them in a tender and caring way. Now, the new program we launched 6 months ago was Educate a Child. This is going to be a new foundation. And this is Sheikha Moza's commitment to the 60 million children out of school. So we have a very focused program. The whole idea is we will try and make an impact on those 60 million, and our commitment is 10%. We will try and get 6 million children into school by 2015, 2016. That's a commitment we've made. In the first 6 months, we managed to get 500,000 children into school by funding major programs with partners. So that's just the beginning, and happy to expand more as we go along. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Riadh.
In the USA, there are 300,000 books established every year. In the Middle East, there are only 18,000 books established. That's about 6%. And that shows how people are willing and is interested to read. I always look at education. What's wrong in our region? Why we are part of the developing world? I see this is a key issue. We are a nation, we don't want to read. That's a major problem. And then looking at that, I had to look at education in general and say, okay, as Andrew was saying, there are issues with literacy, but look at the GCC countries, it's between 93 to 97% literacy rate, which is very high. Then if the literacy is high, people do not read, then what's wrong? There must be something wrong. I looked at the quality of education. As we know, most of our education it's a government education. And then I've looked at really few points, and I'm going to share it with you. Number one, the government are not spending enough money in education, rather than rather to spend it on creating conflicts and buying weapons. So they are spending billions of dollars on such issues rather than spend it on education. Number two, inadequate or lack of good syllabus. Our curriculum is outdated. And we need to look at that. I mean, if the syllabus is outdated, you see many examples in our books are not related to today's changes world. Number three is the very low salary paid to teachers. Teachers are the focal point. These are the people who are educating our children. It's a value issue. It's an appreciation issue. We don't appreciate teachers. We are a nation, maybe you look at a businessman, wealthy, that's what we look at, wow. But a teacher, he's very low paid. I'm talking about really in our region, like, even in Kuwait, in Iraq, they are paid as low as $1,000 a month. If a teacher is living on $1,000 a month, what do you think he's going to produce? As a matter of fact, a teacher needs to really develop himself. Many teachers I see, they work part-time, taxi drivers. And as a result, what they do, instead of teaching properly, they don't teach, so they got private tuition after schools. And this is a big business now. The other factor is government instability and conflict. I mean, we are engaged into, I don't want to really explain about this, I'm not a politician, but you can see our region, that's what we are good at. And another factor is we don't have our independent research institutions. R&D, it's something strange into this region. How do we develop ourselves if we don't have a proper R&D? And believe me, in the West, R&D, it's a business. So these are the few challenges, I'm just really mentioning the quality of education. But where do we go from here? I'm going just to talk about two things. The way I see it in the long run is we need to create a culture of learning. That is what is missing in our region. We need to create a community of learners. We need to make really the student focus on learn how to learn. We need to embed the idea and concept in our children, lifelong learning. Learning is a process of a continuous, upgrade, research, experimentation, acquiring knowledge. I looked at the education and learning. This is interchangeably, using these words, but I found an example, say education is like taking a horse to a water, but learning is drinking the water. We need our children to drink the water. We need to experiment. We need to look at our children, think of result-based strategy. We need to create communities of continuously trying to experiment the best practices, methodologies, technologies. And we need to apply such ideas and concepts. We are learning. Education is imparting knowledge, giving you knowledge, skills. But learning, it will reflect on behavior. And we need to see that behavior of looking at, we are thirsty for learning, developing. And this is a continuous process. We need to have access to information. In our region, we don't know what the hell is going on in our education system because government is not sharing such information. If we don't have such information, I am as a parent, I don't know what is the budget allocated, what are the long-term plans for our kids, our kids, what they are learning. Are they learning properly? What they are learning, is it going to be the outcome? Is it matching the market demand? Are they going to get proper employment? There's absence of such information. So this is really one solution I see, is to see it's a long-term strategy which is really trying to create a nation and community of learners. The second thing is really very quickly, I'm sure in the past 2 days, many people talked about PPPs and the public-private partnership. That's very well, but I see we need to encourage the private sector investors. If we don't create an education industry, I don't think we will get out of this mess, to be honest. We have to create, I'm saying this as a business. It's a very well-paid business. And in businesses create competition. And with competition, we get continuous enhancement and development. Look at for example, the health industry. Each hospital or clinic, they are bringing in new doctors, visiting doctors, and this is whatever, this is bringing that, and I'm going to bring that. And with education, if we compete, this is a very staple. If there are investors here, this is a well and a good return investment. It's a stable business. It's a cash flow business. So we need really to create such an industry. Without creating a private education investors and industry, and I don't think this will work, because government, if we wait for government, it will never happen. Although we have to work and still work closely, only what I need from the government is this: giving incentives to investors, giving, for example, lands, giving the initial capital cost to establish such schools, universities. I've seen recently in Kuwait for the past years, for example, they've given lands to investors. They built now 7 universities and colleges. The demand is there. People loved it. All universities are full. Before, there was no private university in Kuwait. Schools. Kuwait now is booming. I mean, I have my kids in a school. It used to be like, 500 students. Now it's 2,000. And there's huge competition. And what we are paying, to be honest, it's a huge amount of money. And there is no value for money, to be honest. So the demand is high. And what the Kuwaiti government did, for example, they have the Applied Education and Training Authority, which is an independent from the Ministry of Education and Higher Education. So they are developing the national skills. So what they do, they did this very well. They do partnership with local institutions. And they come, for example, I myself experienced this for years. So we go and propose a program, a 2-year program, a diploma called a program, in partnership with the government to graduate students for whatever, computer science, office management, and stuff like that. So they did, some sort of, partnership between government and the private sector. So to me, I just really finished that we need really to invest in our children. We need to embed and see the idea of continuous learning and love for learning. Thank you.
Shukran, gentlemen. As you'll appreciate, the Middle East is a very complex and diverse region. And whilst we have 3 speakers, we have an operator, we have vocational training, and we have social responsibility here as our panelists. I'm not sure whether you have picked up through each of 3 of them the common thread, that the investment that's required in R&D that's happening in Qatar, that's starting in Kuwait, needs to occur in other places such as Libya. I just want to make a shift at the moment from what we're talking about and read you another set of statistics, if I may. Because the focus of our panel and the people in this room is on the student, enabling the future generations to improve the status of their current being. But what do they think about that? What do young people in the GCC particularly think? It was a research done by Booz & Company of 5,000 young people. Some of these may shock you. That's why I'm doing it, really. 62% feel that the high cost of living is their biggest concern. 55% believe it's finding a job. 87% think unemployment is a major problem in their country. And Dr. Tidu and I can argue about the statistics for Qatar later. 45% say their primary ambition in life is to complete their education. 32% think their education system has not prepared them to find a job. 39% think a good salary is the most important criterion for a job, whereas 22% think it is job satisfaction. 65% want their governments to develop youth service programs in order to create economic opportunities for youth. 62% want governments to promote youth entrepreneurs. 63% want government to give them increased access to decision-making processes and policies. 70% of young women and 44% of young men said that the government should encourage women to work in different fields. 59% of young men think the woman's primary role in society should be that of a wife and a mother. Strangely enough, only 22% of women think the same. 67% want their country to be known as a technologically advanced nation, and 65% want it to be known as an educated, intellectual society. 36% exercise less than once a week. 28% participate in community development. And lastly, the most popular leisure activities among young people take place at home. 88% surf the internet, 78% watch television, and 65% spend time at home with their family. We can sit here as educated colleagues of all walks of life and discuss concepts, but we need to have paradigm shifts in some of the mentality of our young people. So my question to the panel is, from their respective countries specific and their own background, how are we going to do it? I'll start with Riadh. Yeah. You have the mic, Dr. Tidu. You start. How are we going to do it? How are we going to engage these young people who have, with the exception of what young men think young women should be doing, engaging them in their communities, engaging them in interests, and raising the standards of student achievement, decreasing the opportunities of youth unemployment?
I think there are two simple ways of doing it. One is through a high-quality educational system, and we talked about that. And I think the shift that has to come is this concept of learning through research, rather than learning through being brainwashed and through rote learning. And the whole concept of research is very important to start at a young age. And what we have in Qatar is a system where research is not just confined, as I may have given you the impression, to the university professors. It goes all the way down into the school system. And we have research funds from $5,000, or actually $500, up to $500,000 for research programs for school children. So children can work up in teams. Children can work in teams to apply for research funding, and this funding is decided by a peer review group. So I think the whole concept of learning through research and inquiring minds is key. And this is not something new. This region was the leader in that. If you just go back to the 10th, 11th, 13th centuries, this part of the world was doing absolutely stunning work in medicine, in science, in mathematics. So it's not that it can't be done. You just need the environment that helps you to create it. And the environment is through the right type of teaching, which my colleague on the left talked about very eloquently. The other part that's very, very important is role models. Children need role models, and the best role models are mothers. And if the mothers are educated and take an interest in education, the problem is solved immediately. And in fact, the numbers are quite encouraging. In Qatar University alone, 70% of the enrollment is female. This is a stunning number. Qatar Foundation's universities have 50% women. In subjects like chemical engineering or mechanical engineering, they have 50% women students. And they actually go on and work. They work in QTEL, they work in Qatar Petroleum. And this is a change that you could not have imagined 10 years ago. And I think everything takes time. And if you have the right leadership, the right role models, the right systems in place, you can make an impact. And I think this region is ready for it. And I think some of the leadership in those parts where it's not happening have to wake up. And you can see changes. There are huge changes going on in Saudi Arabia. If you look at the education system, it's dramatically changing. The establishment of King Abdullah University of Science and Technology is a major step. This could not have been imagined by anyone 5 years ago. And it's making a real impact in the mindset of people.
Thank you.
Thank you. As I said, I mean, again, there are certain measures we can think of. I think we have to start with our children, and we have to embed the idea of love for learning, continuous learning, lifelong learning, and we have to make some incentives, for our children and our, youth. The way we teach, the last 2 days we're talking about using the technology, for example. Now, this region is changing, whether we like it or not. The change is already there. There is a revolution in the technology. Now my kids and your kids, every day you go home, everybody's on the iPad, iPhones, everybody's chatting, using social medias, Facebook and so on. They are connected. And I think with this revolution and globalization, we are getting together. We are learning from each other. The teacher has to change the way he's delivering. And I think it's more interactive, more incentive, ways of encouraging students to learn properly, to love the kind of continuous learning. And I think with the creation, for example, institutionalize the R&D approach. We need to work and apply such ideas. We should be really thriving for new ideas, technologies, methodologies. The parents play a big role here. And instead of, for example, we watch, Turkish series every day, and we are, honestly, this is what's happening. I see the whole region are, amazed with this Turkish series, issues, and everybody's glued to the TV to watch such series. Instead, just like, we can have maybe half an hour conversation. Let's talk, maybe pick up a book and talk, a subject, for example. There are, series of issues. I will leave it to Karim to add, more things. Thanks.
I'm going to give, now that you've dropped Karim in this dilemma that he's facing, I would now like to just recapture something about Karim in terms of his role here in being involved in this panel. In the private sector, and we've heard lots about public-private partnerships, increased competition, he is the vice chairman of the British Columbia Canadian International School, and more importantly, the chairman of the International Schools Committee of Egypt. With increased competition, he's collaborating with his opposition for the benefit of, obviously, the students, particularly across the city of Cairo, and more importantly, when they ramp out and grow across Egypt. So I'm going to let you off the last question about how we're going to fix all these problems, unless you have something to say, and ask you another one.
I do have something to say about
Please.
Egypt, not about the region. I tend to completely disagree, with all respect, with both of you. Completely. Yeah, you talk about a teacher in Kuwait making $600, and this is not enough. You know how much a teacher makes in Cairo? $60. And you tell me it's not enough?
Is that a justification?
This is the public education. Forget private, we're talking about public education, the government. You have to understand, Egypt Ministry of Education's budget, annual budget, last year was 40 billion Egyptian pounds. 38 billion Egyptian pounds out of it is out for salaries, which remains 2 billion pounds to do the following. Build schools. Maintain current schools. Oh, no, it doesn't happen even. Print books. 3 years ago, we had a meeting with the Minister of Education trying to convince him that instead of putting 300 to 400 million pounds every year in printing the books, digitize them, put them on your website, and the students can download them as PDF files. He almost kicked me out of his office. His mind cannot comprehend such cost savings. The education scene in Egypt, I think, is totally different than the Gulf. And with all my respect and admiration for something like the Qatar Foundation, something I'm closely watching, and hoping one day my country can establish something like that. But it's very hard for a country like Egypt. It's a big country. It's a very poor country. Yet, huge potential. You talk about the school being oversized. Some schools in Egypt operate on 2 shifts, 8 to 3, 4 to 9. Where's this happening in the region? Yeah, thank you. So I think in Egypt, the answer is money. Money. The teacher has to make $5,000 as a salary. Now, when I come to the teacher and give him my son and tell him, I need some private tutoring, then he kicks me out of his classroom. The teacher needs to go spend some money in Dubai Mall, like we all do. They need to have income which they can invest and grow their children. then they will be able to teach. Then they will be able to offer a nurturing environment. Then, instead of having 60, 70 students per class, it will be the normal 20 to 30. Money. If you want to talk about the solving education issue in Egypt, it's a money thing. Thank you.
Thanks for that passionate plea, and donors, as you leave, will meet you just outside the door. I'd like to ask a supplementary question, Karim. Where's the money going to come from? Within Egypt, because there's a growing, burgeoning middle class. I have seen it with my own eyes. Or is it continuation of foreign aid? Bearing in mind what we heard yesterday from Dr. Zakia.
No, I think it's from Egypt. We have a lot of money in Egypt, but it's we have a cash management problem. Tourism. I mean, look a country like compare us to the region. Okay, Dubai, Istanbul, Athens, Cairo, or Egypt. You know, we were very happy. You know that in 2010 we have reached 14 million tourists. 14 million. 14 million. This is. Do you know how many people go to Paris or to France every month, every year? 70. 70 million people. And we are very happy we've reached 14. Do they have the pyramids? No. Do they have the Nile? No. Do they have the Sphinx? No. Do they have Sharm el-Sheikh? No. Do they have El Gouna? No. Do they have the White Desert? No. They have a mini pyramid, Louvre, but that's nothing. No offense to any French people.
Any French people here? Excusez-moi. With somebody did tell me that a teacher's salary based in an international school in Dubai, you need to probably fund a teacher another 20% to attract them to Riadh. But the teacher's opinion is they would quite happily have the same salary, because in Riadh they save nearly 60% of what they would actually spend if they were in Dubai. Again, complexity within the region, conflict within the region, funding issues within the region. Before we open up to the floor, I'd just like to touch on one more point, and I'm going to ask you about it, Habibi. He, with his group of international schools, have come up with a program called Adopt a School. Can you tell us about that? Because I think it's very, very important for this audience.
Adopt a School, maybe in the business world, it's CSR. We have a corporate social responsibility towards the business that we are in. So we have decided that every international school will have to adopt a public school in the area where they work in. And we have adopted a school in the area next to our school, 1,200 students, 600 boys and girls, K-12, public school, with, Andrew, you have seen the pictures, but just to give you in 30 seconds, in the girls section of the building, of the campus, 600 girls, they have 3 bathrooms. And you all know how much girls like to stand in front of the mirror.
Careful.
They like to spend
This is a fantastically gender, almost 50% audience.
3 bathrooms, and if you do the math, in the 30 minutes of recess, if 10% they want to use the bathroom, there's not enough time. It's just things like the first time I met the principal, I told her, I toured your school and I can automatically write 300 things that need to be done. But what is your migraine? What is the headache? She said, plumbing and bathrooms. And the second thing was class furniture. So we're doing it in phases. We have already finished, and I don't know how I can share some of the pictures, maybe on a website or something, but we have fixed infrastructure of plumbing and classroom furniture. We still have a lot to go, but the second phase is training in English, in computer. We will train the teachers to be able to teach better. This is all free of charge, and this is an obligation for every international school in our committee.
Thanks, Karim. Just one final thing to conclude, and then the idea is, if you wish to ask a question, just let yourselves know. There are many representatives of other nations in the Middle East, from Oman, Saudi Arabia, Libya, here in the audience. So I'd like to hear perhaps questions. If you have a personal statement to either the panel or to the room, if you could limit that to a couple of minutes, because the session will have about 50 minutes to go before we conclude. The issue, and I would very much appreciate any of my Omani colleagues in here correcting me on what I understand from conversations I have had recently in Muscat. Somebody mentioned yesterday, it may well have been in the early session and then was repeated by our keynote speaker, a young male unemployed youth in this part of the world is considered dangerous. Recently, the Sultan Qaboos in Oman traveled round. He does it, I think, once a year, and goes and listens to his people in their place of residence, out in the villages, out in Nizwa, etc. Through discussions we've had with people in both the public and private sector, he's come up with a very ingenious way of resolving some of this youth unemployment, or youth who have graduated and have no roles within the market. So he's taken, I believe there's around 250,000 workers in the public sector, many of whom who have small, medium enterprise businesses that they run on the side. And because the youth told him, and they did have a period of time of unsettlement as the Arab Spring spread from Tunisia throughout the Middle East, where there was a lot of dissatisfaction and frustration because there were not these opportunities, either for those who were graduates or were not. So he's actually in the final stages of implementing a policy to take some of the public sector workers out of their roles to focus on their small, medium enterprises for a year, on full salary, automatically creating 40,000 vacancies for those graduates, and there will be an application process, or undergraduates, to be able to then come in and have a job within the public sector for a year. What that will do economically, and I'm not the greatest economist, other than being able to very closely supervise my wife's spending, that there's a creation of wealth happening. There is money being generated within the economy to stimulate growth. So I may be incorrect on some of the detail, but I'd like to hear from the audience today any other initiatives that have been taken in firstly the K-12 public and private sector, and then secondly around addressing this issue of the attitudes of the youth and the employability of the youth to rectify the situation. Any comments from the panel first before we throw open to questions? Riadh? Vocational training's your sector, yeah?
I think it's in this region, we need to continuously train our people. We have to find, programs. I have, one of the problems in the quality education is the lack of qualified staff we have. Whether it's in school management, administration, qualified teachers for specific subjects. We lack this. I mean, again, as a culture, we don't invest that much in our human capital. And that's, again, it's part of a culture which is really evolving, and we have really to change that. Now, in government, in Kuwait, there is a government is doing, because in Kuwait, everybody has the right to free education, and they have to get them a job. Because it's a small country. I mean, Kuwait is around, 1.1 million. The total population, 3.5. So this 1.1 million, there are, every year there are, graduates, and they don't have a place for a job. All the jobs is being created, and everybody wants to work where? In the government. Secured, relax, nobody works. And that's true. I mean, we have really, it's like, a hidden unemployment. I mean, if one employee in the government can do the job, there are 6 people are sitting. And what they are doing, they take seeds and whatever, and they chat. And early morning, you go, for example, from 8 to 10, nobody works. What they tell you, we have a breakfast. I mean, that's really, this is the kind of attitude you have. So everybody loves that. He said, okay, I'm secured. My retirement, even when I get old, I get my money. So why do I go to private sector? Private sector you have to work. You have to produce. Somebody will ask you. So what the government did now, they have to engage all Kuwaitis, graduate Kuwaitis, to work in the private sector. And they've done a huge job. I think they are training continuously such people. And we have, very good success story with that. You can see now Kuwaitis really are working, for example, as salespeople. We've never had this before. I had a program, for example, through my company, Target Training and Consulting, with the Saudi Arabia government. We've trained 200 Saudis, fresh graduates, high school graduates. It's a one-year program, and we qualify them to become professional sales professionals. Because the market needs locals to be salespeople. In our region, we don't have locals. Usually, for example, in the GCC country, you see Lebanese is a salesperson, or a Syrian, or Jordanian, and so on. You don't find the locals they sell. Said, I sell? No way. But now I think the attitude is changing. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to open up for questions. There are a number of microphones at the back. No? Do we have any rovers? I'm more than happy to walk. Probably do with the exercise. Fadda.
Thanks, Andrew. Many thanks, Andrew, and thanks for your gist as well. It's very interesting to listen to all the conversation here, and I will start with what Karim said. I'm not going to agree with you, Riadh, about your generalization about what's going on in the Middle East. Always we are using that term of Middle East, which highly used in the political discourse, and trying to also apply it to the educational situation. It's all about the leadership. So you look for some countries, they are doing well. And you can't say they are underdeveloped, they are really advanced and developed nation here. So the lack of leadership in many of Middle East countries, yes, it's impacting not only the educational situation, but impacting all the aspect of the life. And you are talking about key figures, key countries in the Middle East, Egypt, Syria, and Tunisia, and many other countries. However, the question is still there. What's the role of education? And I think one of the things that we learned from the last 2 years and Arabic Spring is about civic engagement. It's about how to educate students from early childhood to play an active role in the public life. And we witness really a very inspiring evidence that people, when they explore their power themselves, they can carry change. And that's what happened in the last few years. However, this should be teach carefully in the school. It's not only going to the street and shouting. You need to be very, the citizens need to be very careful when they elect, when they vote, when they also look to the statements, look to the media and see this is opinion, this is fact. So it's about also teaching students to be critical in the educational system. And we see this when the leadership change in any country. This is what happened in Turkey, in Brazil. All aspect of the life is changing and educational sector is part of it. In Oman, going to what you mentioned, Andrew, yes, His Majesty travel across the country. It's one of his practices, and it's worked very well. However, that the other institutional practices is there, and it's also play an active role to formulate the final public decision. In Oman, in the last few years, yes, there is an employment rate. However, it's not about the job, if it's there or not. It's about, is the affordable job enough to provide the basic needs for any Omanis? Part of the problems in this region is about the competitions. In Oman, we have more than 1.5 million foreigners right now, and they are happy to accept $200 or $300 and work. They are fine, but this is not going to work with any Omanis. Last week, more than 5,000 jobs offered to Omanis. Only 20 of them accept the offered job. The foreigners, they are happy to accept it because it's not going to take them any further. However, we said, well, we need to focus on the entrepreneurship in the education. And that's what we started what we call it career guidance services in the school 4 years ago. So each Omani school have now between 1 to 2 career guidance specialists. Also, we bring this set of reform to support students, youth to carry and create their own business. And one of the things that you mentioned, if I am a public servant and I have tiny business, I need time to go, the government will say, well, look, for 12 months, we are happy to give you leave to go and look for your business. Because what he's going to do, if his business works very well, he will leave his job and create another. So it's work, and we are witnessing improvement in the unemployment in the Omani society, and all the education have and has really an important role to carry change and to bring the correct leadership to any nation. However, teaching students how to be active citizens from an early stage is an important issue. Thank you.
Shukran. Comment from any of the panel? Leadership. Leadership, obviously, in terms of the 3 roles you play in separate parts, either presently or in the past, has got you to be on this distinguished panel. Comments around leadership? I'll start with you, Doctor.
I think enough has been said about it. Maybe I really have nothing to add. It's a very good summary in what you've said. Entrepreneurship probably is the key, is to create small and medium-sized industries. But I think that really the government needs to help as well. The regulations have to be very simple. Today, I think in most Middle East countries, for some poor chap to start a business is a nightmare. It's impossible to start a business. And I think the governments need to make simple rules to allow small and medium-sized industries to start up very quickly The other is to somehow enable small and medium-sized industries to take part in major contracts that are awarded by the government. The government should set aside, like in the US, a certain amount of money that goes to small and medium-sized businesses, whether it's 5% or 10% of any contract, whether it's a cleaning contract or a teaching contract. So, you know, when they try and hire somebody like GEMS, they should be obliged to hire a small GEMS, a locally created company as well, to work side by side so that they can learn from it. So I think procurement rules should change, and rules about establishing companies should change as well.
Just as quickly, absolutely. I mean, it's all about leadership. I always say, when I go for certain companies, they have problems, whether it's a structural problem, issues in their organization, and I meet the management, and always they complain about the employees. I say, the problem is the head, not the tail. It's about who's at the top. So if you see but I think the culture has to change, because from where we get our leaders, it's within the societies. So, but the culture, once we have a learning culture, a love culture, an open-minded, and then one day you will have a leader that wants to take his nation up and wants to build. Just like, look at Dubai. I was talking to Karim, last night, and I said, Dubai do not have resources, to be honest. All what they have is desert. Look at what happened. For example, a country like Iraq, it's one of the wealthiest nations. It's total destruction. It's about leadership.
Questions? I'm glad we're going to see some female hands coming.
Hi, my question was actually for Dr. Tidu. It's with respect to the work that the Qatar Foundation is doing in the education sector. Given the population makeup in Gulf countries like Qatar is more expatriate biased, do you think that's going to have an impact on the rollout of this initiative? And also, is there a risk of any kind of brain drain if the knowledge-based economy doesn't pan out exactly as is envisioned in Vision 2030?
Thank you.
I think the issue of brain drain is highly unlikely. The Qatari families are very close-knit families. They like to stay together. And I don't think people like to travel. So you see a lot of young Qataris, whether they're single or married, they like to travel with their families or on their own. But I think for them to work abroad is highly unlikely. So I think the issue of brain drain is highly likely. The rollout of the program, but there are two programs. One is a program which is part of the foundation's attempt to educate its own people. And that, I think, is going very well. The Educated Child is a separate program where the commitment is to help the poor parts of the world where there are big issues of funding. And especially in conflict zones where children are desperate for help. So there are two different programs, and I think really I don't see any danger in any loss of impact in what we're trying to do.
We have a question from a distinguished guest representing the youth. Please stand and introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Keita Choi and I go to Jumeirah College. And I think it's really interesting that given today how a major issue is how we're going to engage young people, I'm actually the only student in this audience in the room. What I want to know is how can we reduce the disconnect between the discourse that happens between specialists such as yourselves that always happens behind closed doors and real tangible change that students can actually observe?
Just the last bit again.
Okay.
Because he's going to be the first one up
It's
to
okay.
attempt to answer
I forgive
this.
your age, don't worry.
And he's now really scared. Just the last bit around the fact that the likes of us sit behind closed doors and make decisions, and we have the youth here challenging us.
Represent. What I want to know is how can we reduce the disconnect between the discourse of specialists such as yourselves that happens behind closed doors and real tangible change that students such as myself can observe?
Simple answer. It's what we call consumer insight in marketing. It's building your strategy on your feedback. And I think this is how this business should be managed and ran. It's useless to sit in a tower and make plans because you have to make plans. I think the plans should be made because of problems, because of comments that you're receiving from your market, and you analyze that and you put it in a strategy, and then you start with I think this is the most successful and most straightforward way in making the two ends meet.
I think my colleague has answered the question, I hope. I really don't have much to add.
Promoting gender equity.
Hi, this is for Karim. I would like to know more about Adopt a School and also about this cooperation that you have of international schools. You know, schools have, competitiveness among them, yeah? And how do you manage that? And what are the issues that you really, work together to resolve? And what are the challenges that are facing you guys and you are trying to overcome them?
We're trying to mainly tackle issues that have to deal with the market, not specified issues. So for example, if the government has put a new rule on taxation, now this affects you and this affects me. So taking a decision together and seeing the whole picture before replying to that is very important. Because if you go and I go and everybody goes alone, we're very powerless. But if we go as a committee with 20,000 students, with the top businessmen and the politicians and the media people, their kids go to our school, we're very strong. And they listen to us. How we work together is we have created a code of ethics. You can check us, I will give you the website for this organization after. We have a code of ethics. We help the business grow. We don't do the nasty things that should not be done.
If I may add, I think Karim raised a very interesting idea of an international school adopting a local school. I think there is another variation of that we ought to experiment with, and I'm trying myself to do that, is to get a local or international business to collaborate with the school. At the moment, the corporate social responsibility programs are very diffused. And when you talk to big companies, they tell you, oh, we're helping the blind or we're helping children with healthcare. It's not focused enough. And I think we need to push businesses to adopt simple programs, either a school itself, like you're doing with the international school. And that model would work very well because you bring not only the money from the big businesses, you bring the youth in these big businesses as well. Big businesses have a lot of young, very active graduates who could devote 5% of their time to teaching and coaching children. And I think that's a model we ought to be working with. And that's something which can be initiated by governments, it can be initiated by foundations, but that's an experiment we're trying as well in Educate a Child, where we're adopting schools, where we're saying to businesses, big companies like Shell or Total, to say, look, you have a CSR program, but we don't understand it, it's too diffuse. Why don't you adopt a school with us? We'll put half the money, you put the other half of the money, and why don't we jointly help the school? And very often the business will say, yes, we're prepared to do that if it's an area of influence we need to be in, which is fine. At least you go with your eyes open. So I think this is an experiment worth trying to push big businesses to focus much more on small, tangible results rather than very grand schemes.
Just, one comment I would like to say is, again, I always think, long term. I mean, the gentleman, talk about immediate, things. In our culture, we don't have this idea of corporate social responsibility. Few maybe are engaged. How do we do that? We have to learn and teach our children to give, to donate from childhood. And then when they become, adult, then they will have this kind of social responsibility, and they have to, for example, contribute to education or any other causes.
And I think the VSO program in America, the voluntary service for young children finishing school before they went to university, was a very good scheme. And I think in this region, we need to encourage children to spend a year doing voluntary work somewhere or the other. And that is not something which parents are forcing their kids to do. And I think this is a culture we need to breed.
Craig.
Good morning. First, I'd like to say thank you very much for your words this morning. The conversation's been quite stimulating. I'd like to pick up on a couple of things just on what Riadh and the gentleman behind me mentioned in regards to perceived pathways for students. How do you think we can broaden what is considered to be a positive pathway or vocation for students, actually broaden what they consider to be a positive pathway? So not necessarily just business, not necessarily academia, possibly into electrical, plumbing, services, food industry, etc. Do you think enough's being done, and what can be done to broaden those?
Very important. This is the future. Everybody in this region wants his kid to be a lawyer, a doctor, an engineer. I'll tell you a fun incident. Do you know Sharm el-Sheikh, Sinai? Okay, I was once there with my friends, and we were staying in this hotel away from where the cool people are. So we wanted to go where the cool people are. Okay, so we took a cab, all right, and I told him this is where I need to go. So while he's driving, I told him, okay, this is where I will get off Ya Usta, which means in Arabic, taxi driver. He pulled the handbrake, and he almost got in a fight, and he was very aggressive to me because I called him an Usta. And I couldn't understand why he was that furious, and he turned out to be a lawyer. And I told him, listen, I understand. I do not know that you are a lawyer. I did not offend you. But if you don't want to work as a taxi driver, then don't, because that's the name. That's what you call. It's like being in a university. You say doctor. You don't say nurse. You say doctor. But then this is a trigger. Here's a lawyer driving a cab in Sharm el-Sheikh. This guy. He's worked his give me a nicer word. He's worked very hard, feet, for 4 years to become a lawyer, to drive a cab, and all you need to drive a cab in Egypt is, a cab. Sometimes not even a license, but vocational. This is absolute, and people here like Saida. Where's Saida? Saida, she always gives a very good example that vocational is not only an electrician or a plumber. Vocational is an interior designer. Vocational is a fashion designer. We need to rebrand, and I quote Saida, rebrand vocational. This is the future. They make a lot of more money than us. And if you put this as an offer, and you train those guys, they come out, they have a good job, they have the money, they're trendy. It has to change. And if it doesn't change, we will always continue to be an underdeveloped country.
You got to keep it.
The doctor doesn't speak. Question at the back.
Picking up on Dr. Tidu's comment about voluntary service, we heard yesterday the president of a country of Burundi say that on Saturday, they all do community work. So they have 6 million people working on Saturdays, building schools and cleaning schools and maintaining schools, et cetera, et cetera. Do you think a scheme like that, Burundi is a small country, I suppose it's feasible and doable. Do you think a scheme like that could be successful in the Middle East and a larger region, including the subcontinent, perhaps?
I think it's a great idea. Whether you maintain schools on a Saturday or a Friday is a different issue. I think it's the concept of giving your time and commitment. And each country will have a different need. It depends where you are. In Oman, the need might be quite different to the need in Egypt, and almost certainly will be different. But I think the whole concept of voluntary work has to come in. And you start with childhood, but then you have to wait a long time. But today there are lots and lots of kids who are 16, 17, 18 who can contribute significantly. And they're young graduates who have been employed by the McKinseys and the Price Waterhouses of the world. They should be giving their time because they're well paid enough. And I think this is something we need to push very hard. And you can only do that through the parents and the companies.
I just want to really comment on what Karim said about, and Craig's question about the vocational, training. I don't think we have a choice, to be honest. We just have to be engaged in our children to learn, how to become plumbers, carpenters. We have to change the concept. Yesterday, I was listening to a panelist where he's talking about in Nigeria, for example, they put an ad for a truck driver. And the requirement was all the truck drivers they have to be graduates. And he got a response, 7,000 plus graduates, master degrees, PhDs applying for such opportunity. And they put a training program and whatever, and then they develop such a program, then the truck driver can own that truck. So I think there are creative ideas, and at the same time we need to get out of, okay, we have aspirations, you want to become doctor, this, that, whatever, engineer, but at the same time, it's okay, a job is a job, and it's respected. No matter what you do, this is what we have to believe. That's what part of the changing concepts what we have in this region. And for the voluntary work, that's again, I think, it just really we have to start from the childhood. And we have to bring in our children in a different way, and that we have to see the concept of giving, participating, engaging. For example, in many countries, for example, like as public toilets, for example. We don't have this concept. For example, you go in the West, in any gas station or as you are driving, beautiful, very clean, hygienic. But we don't have this concept here, for example, in this region. Okay, maybe it's a money issue, yes, but it's a cultural issue too. Even if you go to houses, you can see that. So that's really, it's something which we really have to change.
Morning, gentlemen. Just sticking with this theme of vocational training and skills-based training. I was just keeping up there with what's going on next door in the Europe session. And I'm just going to read the tweet and perhaps get your comments on it. It says, Spain spends 7.2 billion euros per annum on skills-based training, yet has a 25% unemployment rate. My question is, what lessons can be learned from countries around the world, developed countries, that have tried a lot of this sort of stuff in terms of vocational training, and how can we use those lessons to make sure it's a success?
People that aren't focused on this session and are listening to other sessions will be reprimanded later. You want to have a crack?
Well, I think the answer is very simple. It's two things. One is regulatory changes. It's absolutely essential to change the regulations for small and medium-sized enterprises or self-employed people. And the second one is the pay. We have to be able to pay people who are trained properly. I think in countries like Spain, that doesn't happen. I have a house in Spain, and the amount of red tape that's involved is unbelievable. For any small thing you want to do, you have to go to 3 different agencies to change everything you want to the smallest change you want to make. So I think regulations are a big issue, and they need to be broken down. And I think this region probably has regulations too, and I think Egypt is famous for that. And I think now that there's a democracy, hopefully they'll change.
There's a democracy? Help me say that. Yes, I could comment on the regulations here in Dubai for getting a driver's license, but I won't. Now, I had a question from down the back.
Yes, good morning to everybody. Thank you for what you listened. My name is Basma Al-Siyoufi. I'm from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Ministry of Education. I've listened to the enlightenment on the experience gentlemen have said. And let me say, and I need your illustration about that, we all know our problems in the Middle East. And when we speak out as if we are rubbing the pain and we point out to really what do we need. But firstly, if we said that leadership and it's the head of the fish, as they say in administration, or the tail, where do we go from there to this in order to fix it? On the other hand, we don't have a choice but to focus on what the private sector could engage in those countries in order to promote such kind of education, as long as we know that government's procedures and government education is like an elephant, and it is really very hard to move forward with it. So let's say it politically, it's hard to find a decision in this era of time, in the spring countries or what we say. And on the other hand, how could we engage the globalization, or let's say promoting that what's happening around the world with a global citizenship, and in the same time keeping our identity in the Middle East towards really fulfilling that kind of difficult equation in our area of time. Thank you.
Comments?
It's I think your comment is really a little complex, and you've involved so many aspects. Yes, we've talked about leadership. I mean, that's, it's something we need to change. I mean, change is happening. It's inevitable. As you said, we know all our problems, and we know the solutions too. But how do we do it? I think it's bits by bits. I mean, you have to contribute something. I have to do my part, and she and he has to do his part too. All from where we work, from our perspective, and what we can do and what we can engage, and that's what we have to do. Because if we wait for the government, maybe it will not happen, maybe it will happen in 50 years. But, however, I think what we can do something, our children can do something. You see, we all sometimes, think, I cannot do, I am hopeless, the government should do, or the private sector should do. But I think, for example, cleanliness, that's a culture again. If you see something like, in the ground, take it, put it in the rubbish bin. That's something, it's a small contribution, but if your child watch you doing that, he will do it again, and then it's become, after maybe 10 years, maybe 15 years, we have a culture. So I think we can do whatever we can do from our own, where we are sitting and what we can do.
It's an interesting concept in terms of many of the countries in the region have engaged in some form of public-private partnership in terms of education reform, where government schools have enabled foreign expatriates, well-educated people from within the region and further afield, as far afield as New Zealand, for example. And you've gone into some of these schools, and there is this culture of just leaving the rubbish on the ground. And don't worry, at the end of the break, both boys and girls, at the end of the break, the maids will come through and pick it all up. We did, about 3 years ago, a sort of an ad hoc survey and instructed staff who were involved with the government reform projects to just gently ask the students to pick it up. And they did. So there's a disconnect with role modeling, for sure. But secondly, actually engaging them and saying, listen, this is our environment, this is your future environment. It's a good thing to pick it up. You'll feel good when you help clean up your school. And the students did it. Question.
Good morning. I just didn't want to give my back to anyone. My name is Munir Mukaddim. I'm the head of the boys' school at Al-Ittihad Private School in Abu Dhabi. I wanted to just refocus the discussion on the student, when we talk about student outcomes, and them as, I guess, the primary stakeholders in all these discussions and conferences. I'd like to share with you the most enchanting times of my day at school. And it is the most enchanting times of the Students' Day, and ironically, it's those times outside of the classroom. And I had an experience the other week where one of my students found a spider in the playground, and he was off the walls. He was extremely excited about what he just stumbled upon. And his heart was really alive with this sense of curiosity and this amazement at this 8-legged, furry, disgusting. My heart was dead to what he had found, but he was completely alive. And I speak to you, it's interesting, I speak to you as a convert to Islam, as of 4 years, and I share this because I feel when we ask ourselves the very important question, what is the role of education? And how do we bridge that disconnect? You know, and the sole student in here brought that up. How do we bring that enchantment back to students' lives? I feel we need to ground that question in a very important ontological question about our conceptions of ourselves. Now, maybe this discourse is foreign to these types of conferences in a world or an educational system that has become secular, divorced. You know, it's not common to speak of that ontological question, where are we coming from, where are we going? But it's very important. I mean, a lot of us today chose to come to this room, Middle East, based on our sense of where are we coming from, where are we going? Whether that's professionally, whether that's I want to make my flight at 2 o'clock. So that question, what is the role of education, is when we link it back to that conception of ourselves, I think can produce profound results. And so at the fear of losing some people here, because maybe what I'm saying might resonate with some and might not resonate with others. So I'll pose the question, same question, but two different sides of the coin. So what is the role of our education in relation to our ontological conception of ourselves? So if this resonates to you, inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un, then my question is, the system today, our educational systems, even the formats, is that congruent? Is that harmonious with our conception of ourselves? A student asked me 2 weeks ago, he said, why am I here? What am I learning? Now, quick we are to get into the advising mode. Oh, you're here to get an education, to get a university degree, but there was a very deep question at the core of that. He's sitting in a classroom, coming from a family or a worldview that holds inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. You know, from God do we come and to God do we return. A worldview where science and faith, science is a manifestation of that faith. It's very interesting in Arabic. My Arabic is very weak. I learned Arabic in taxi car conversations. So it was I learned the combos of cuss words.
I hope you didn't offend anybody.
Now? No. No, not at all. The word for knowledge in Arabic, ilm, and the word for world, which means alim. The word for world means alim. The word for word, alim, is grammatically is the instrumental form of that word, ilm. So the world is the instrument through which you attain knowledge. It's very interesting. And the concept of the human being is based on the fitra. Fitra means that primordial disposition of all of us, that we are natural learners, simply put. We are naturally learners. So when we talk about paradigm shift, is a paradigm shift about ourselves, who my heart is dead to this spider, or is a paradigm shift with the children? The children already have that curiosity. So to go back to my two-coin question, is our system and our curriculum and that format of education harmonious with our worldview? Those are to the people who this sentiment resonates with. And to those of us who it doesn't resonate with, when we bring our services and we bring our ideas, and I say this as a cultural anthropologist in training myself, is what we are bringing organic? Is it from the people, for the people? Is it something that will match their cultural norms, cultural ideas? And I only say this not to win an argument, but to find a solution or a formula that'll bring out most productivity in the end. So just food for thought in that regard. Thank you for your time and your patience.
Anybody?
Great question. I will try to answer it in less than a minute to give a chance to the rest of the panel. In the public system, no. The answer to your question is no. But in the private international sector, yes. And it's just a start. I have been reading lately a lot of research about a lot of the education is really happening outside the classroom. I remember when I was at grade 3, I was still in public education. At the grade 6, my parents moved me to international education. I remember that we were studying, what is it? It's the sun, you would know. No, the sun, makes the thing grow, so the cow eats it, and we milk the cow.
Yeah.
It's what is it?
Photosynthesis.
Yeah. Photosynthesis. Yes, that's it. So we were studying that, and after the lesson, the next day, my teacher took us to a farm, and this farm is attached to a milk factory. So we got to see the cow, we got to get tanned by the sun, and we see the cow eating the grass. Then we went into the line, and you see the cow is getting milked, and you see the milk going through the tubes. And at the end of the tour, each of us took, a small pack of chocolate milk. You know what? I still remember that smell of that factory. I was what, grade 3, 7 years old? I still remember it until now. So a lot of teaching is really happening outside of the classroom. And how's this meeting our culture? There has been a trend in the past 10 years about Islamic international schools. And to me, this is very strange, because the word international should not have any religion attached to it. But it is working very well in this culture. You find schools that are building their strategy and the positioning of how they enter this market about wearing an Islamic hat, yet offering an international education. Some they're doing a crappy job, but others are really doing a very good job. And it's quite amazing. I am going to the West, but I'm going as an Eastern. It works. And it's starting to happen, just in international education so far.
I think you've raised a very complex issue, and not a question in my mind. I think really what you've stated is right. I think there's something wrong with the educational system we have today. The original system of the Greek way of learning through a one-to-one learning with philosophical backgrounds and philosophical framework, and the learning of science through experimentation, these are missing completely. We are being taught as if we're in a conveyor belt. You're coming into a factory and you're brainwashed, and you come out the other end through an exam. And I think we need to go back to some fundamental questions and teach children in the context of what you're saying. So I think really you've put some very interesting ideas. How you build a curriculum around it means redesigning a school completely. And I think I'm not aware of anyone I'm not an educationalist, but I've really not seen anyone do it. But you ought to have a go at it. And especially since you run a school, I'd encourage you to do what you're trying to do. It's a wonderful experiment to have a one-to-one teaching which links philosophical ideas, your obligations to your community, to your parents, to your friends, to people, to humanity in general, together with a scientific curiosity is a wonderful combination. And unfortunately, that doesn't happen. Everything is compartmentalized in boxes today. But great idea. Please go for it and try and write about it first and see. And I think writing is one thing just to structure your own thoughts, but you have the great advantage of experimenting in your own school, as long as the parents don't drive you mad. But don't tell them too much.
Any people in the room from ADEC? Good. Go for it, mate. Go for it. Final comment, Riadh?
I think, the role of education, it's simple. You brought, many points to this. Education is learning. Obviously, it's continuously learning. Continuously changing. The idea for you as a student to go to a school is to acquire knowledge, skills, behavior. And once you learn something, you need to put it and apply that knowledge into your real life. And you brought the idea of faith. Faith is always, we know God through science. Even science will teach us to the existence of God. So science, education, and faith all coincides. Actually, faith and religion encourage us to learn more and to invest in acquiring more knowledge and expertise.
Thank you. I'm sorry we have run out of time. Really appreciate the panelists' views, opinions, expertise, and experience, as well as those who've contributed from the youth to the elder statesmen and women of the room. This afternoon, you have an opportunity to go and visit some well-established, vibrant, alternative educational learning centres. We have a challenge in the Middle East North Africa region as an organisation to provide access to education for as many students as we can. That is our chairman's commitment, that's his pledge, that's his tithing from when he was a child, as many as you heard the other day. Alternatively, from a private sector perspective, the Chinese proverb, you can give a person a fish, feed them for a day. You can teach the person to fish, and you can feed them for a lifetime. It's our intent, through GEMS Education or the Vaki Group Foundation, and connectivity with public entities, governments, private investors, to revolutionise the fishing industry. And we're going to need your support. I hope to see you back here next year with case studies on how we've improved the situation in this vibrant part of the world, and appreciate your time this morning. Thank you.